The battle of ice, snow made the world blind. It came sideways and bit like iron, until the men beside me looked like wraiths risen from barrows. Stannis' host stood in it like a graveyard of spears, skeletal, frost-scarred, hungry, yet steady as pilings in a storm. Discipline was their mail. At first light, the Braavosi banker was gone, parchment sealed and signed in the king's blood, and Sir Justin rode with him. 6 men, 12 horses, Alysanne Mormont and the girl they called Arya, bound for the wall. A true king pays his debts, Stannis had said, and wrapped a strip of linen round the cut on his thumb. Coin and fire, both mortgaged. Before the banners formed, a prisoner was dragged to the snow, cloaked, stooped. I knew that shape, that broken stoop. For a heartbeat the world tilted. Theon. No name was spoken. Traitor, said Stannis. Steel whispered. A head fell. The storm swallowed the sound. Men muttered. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted iron. So this is how my brother ends, nameless and cold. There was no time for grief. Horns were blowing. The Freys came on like moths chasing a candle, Hostine at the spear point, blind with rage for Aenys, killed in a pit Crowfood's green boys had dug beneath their noses. Stannis' mouth did not smile, but something in his eyes said he trusted angry foes to do foolish things. The foolish marched, singing, banners snapping. They never saw the trick. The true beacon was doused. A false flame burned steady across the lake, a neat lie the king named his night lamp. For days, his scarecrows had skated and crawled beneath the ice like shipwrights, boring weakness into the lake's black belly. Deeper still, casks had been hidden, Braavosi gifts, not wine, not powder. Wildfire.
The Freys reached the lake's heart. The world split. A green roar clawed up from the cracks. Fire ran in a circle, shrieking, a burning cage drawn on ice. The storm turned emerald, and all at once the field became a verse from the Blackwater, only now the river was frozen and the trap belonged to Stannis. Horses reared and scrabbled on slush that was no longer ground. Men went down, armor dragging them under when ice gave. Some tried to run and found the fire ring glaring back. Some tried to pray and took arrows through the throat. Others climbed on comrades' shoulders and shoved them under to steal another breath. The stink of hair and flesh on the boil throttled the wind. Loose, Stannis said. The sky became iron rain. Ranks rose and loosed, fell and rose behind, steady as oars on a longship. In the cage, Freys died penned like hogs, pierced, drowned, burned, frozen. A knight got his horse turned only for the ice to yawn and take them both. He screamed like a man while he sank. I almost pitied them, almost. Then a horn came, low and cruel enough to bite bone, and with it the dogs. The bastards' riders burst out of the white, smashing into Stannis' centre. The hounds went first, black and hulking, bred for meat. The shield wall buckled. A big brute tore through a gap and flew for the king. A white shape hit it mid-leap. A wolf, vast as a destria's shadow, silent as snowfall. Red eyes like banked coals, fangs like a smith's chisels. One wrench, and the dog's throat came away in steam. Stannis lived, shaken, still standing. In those red eyes I tasted memory. A dead boy king, vows broken at a river crossing, old gods that watch. Then the Boltons were on us. My axe met a mailed man, and the shock ran into my bones. Another came from the right. I turned too slow and felt hot fire spill down my cheek. Captain! Cerwyn, Harlaw-born, loyal as salt, threw himself in as a sword point punched straight through him. The Bolton used his weight, driving the steel and the dying boy into me. I roared, shoved, and split the man's throat with a crosscut. Cerwyn sagged at my boots, his eyes already empty. No time. A rider thundered at me, a dog snapping at his stirrup. I split the hound's skull, my shield shattered under a blow that should have opened me hip to breast. I stumbled, heel skidding on bloody slush. This is where Asha Greyjoy ends, I thought, nameless in the snow beside the brother she failed. Horns answered, deep, rolling, fat with triumph. From the northern ridge, the white merman surged like a breaking tide. Oars of ash, shields sea green and foam white, tridents bobbing like a forest of spears, drums thudded low as heartbeats. Then the roar came down the slope. "The North remembers!" White Harbour answered as one, voices rolling like surf. "The tide remembers!" Their house words. And then the old oath beat after it, steady as oars. "Stark men!" They hit the Bolton flank in a crush of wood and iron, tridents punching past shield rims, hook-headed bills yanking riders from saddles, short boat knives finishing what the pikes began. Banners went under and did not rise. Treachery turned blade true. What they had toasted at feast they paid for here in Bolton blood. Ramsay's flank folded, the rout started like a tear in a sail and ran the length of his line. Dogs went yelping into the dark. Men threw down lances and ran toward fire, only to find the ring still hissing there. When silence finally came, it was a hateful thing. The lake steamed in green seams. The groans of the dying made a small, mean choir. I found my brother by the worst of that music. The bastard lay gasping, grin finally slipping, and the snow around him went black with what leaked out. Theon knelt in the slush, pale as old bone, eyes steady in a face time had carved. For a breath, I saw the boy from Pike, chase-mad on the cliffs, laughing too loud. "You'll always be Reek," the dying thing rasped. Theon shook his head. "No longer. I am Theon Greyjoy, Prince of the Iron Islands, Ward of Winterfell, brother to wolves." His voice did not break. He looked at me, and I hated him for the years, and loved him for surviving them. "Winter has come for House Bolton." The white wolf padded close. He lowered that great head and licked Theon's hand once, tender as a mother with a babe. Theon gave a soft, cracked laugh. "Pat Ghost, Asha. He knows I did not know the name, but I knew the beast." My hand shook against fur, thick as a rope fender. For a heartbeat, he leaned into my palm, then flowed past me like winter itself. One bound, one blur, and Ramsay Bolton's last sound was a wet cough. Theon swayed. I thought he'd topple. Instead, he turned and folded into me, arms weak but fierce. I smelled smoke, and blood, and the boy from Pike. Memory stabbed, his bare feet slapping cold stone as he chased me along the headland, the pride in him when a wooden sword caught my wrist, the boast and the grin that made men roll their eyes and love him anyway. The boy was gone. A shell remained, but when his brow pressed my shoulder, the echo rang so hard it split me. "I thought I lost you forever," I whispered, voice cracking like yardarm in a gale. "You're my brother. Broken or no, you're my sister," he breathed, and softer. "And your brother is finally home." Haunting of the North. The fire popped. Outside, the seams on the lake still hissed where fire had kissed ice. Lord Manderley's voice rumbled like a dock crane. "Your Grace," he told Stannis. "I did what needed doing. I went to Lady Barbary Dustin. She hates Lord Eddard, but she bears no malice for his last boy. I told her what Wex Pike tracked. Rickon Stark lives. I gave her proof she'd demand. Go to the crypts. You'll find 4 swords missing from the Stone Kings." She went and found them gone. Then I swore my envoy, Sir Davos Seaworth, sailed and returned with the heir to Winterfell. Stannis's mouth went thin. "Good," he said, though it sounded more like a judgment than praise. "If the boy lives, he is Lord of Winterfell. The Starks are wardens of the North, so long as the North will name me its king." He turned to the fire. "Words are wind. I'll see the boy with my own eyes. 4 missing swords in the crypts is proof enough to start, not to finish. To Lady Dustin you will send my terms," he went on, flat as iron. "She wards the child in my name, opens her grain barns and gates when I command, and gives a hostage of her blood for good faith. Have it writ, If she withholds by so much as 1 bushel, I will take Barrowton bushel by bushel and stone by stone. He looked to the captains. Ravens to every holdfast. They will fly the direwolf beside the crowned stag and keep my peace, or be numbered with Bolton. Davos may have been your envoy, but he is my hand. I am glad to hear you did not take his head. If he says the boy lives, I believe it, but belief is not a banner. Bring me the boy, and we will raise one. The boy breathes our air. He wet his lips. She said she would ward the child until he comes of age, and more. She will put forward a Risewell niece of her blood, styled a Dustin by letters. My blood and my name, she said, oath and bone, both. I agreed, else we'd not have had the numbers when we take Winterfell. Across the tent, Moore's crow-food Umber tugged his white bear pelt tight and grinned a ruin of a grin. You wanted truth from inside Winterfell? My boys gave it. Built snowmen in the yards where our watchers could spy 'em, each with a shield message tacked on. Bolton never saw. He jabbed a thumb toward the door, pleased as ale. A code simple as soup, tight as a drum. Squire's signals inside Winterfell. Rim notches, knife cut. Every full notch equals 100 spears for that house. A half notch equals 50. Center mark, soot sketch. Crude sign for which house mustered that day. 2 bars for Frey Towers, rough sunburst for Karstark, wavy lines for Manderley, a big X for Dustin Axes, a twig moose curve for Hornwood, bear paw scratch for Mormont, a stickman with broken chain for Umber, a stick flayed, 2 dangling strokes for Bolton. Upper edge sprig, pine pinned equals horse present, none equals on foot. Diagonal slash, char line across the sigil. Openly with Bolton, X secretly with us. O, charred ring, wavering. Placement. East yard equals today's muster. West yard equals yesterday/rotating out. So our watchers knew which counts were fresh. Crowfoot's one good eye gleamed. We read our snow shields nightly like a ledger. That's how we knew where to prick Hostine. Stannis gave a single hard nod. Useful. Manderley's jowls set like anchor stock. White Harbour stands. The tide remembers, and the north must see a Stark with a sword beside him. I spat snowmelt into the fire. Bought with fire, aye. Those casks from Braavos did their work. When the Mad King's pyromancers fled east, the Iron Bank took them in and fed them gold. They breed wildfire now and sell it like coin. We won because Braavos extended our flame. Stannis' jaw tightened. Then the bank has its victory, as I have mine. Today, their fire bought justice. Tomorrow we face winter. He looked from Manderley to Flint, from Wool to the clan captains, and then to me, as if to measure the shape of the north by the faces around his fire. Hear me, he said, voice flat as an anvil. Rickon Stark is Lord of Winterfell by right, and the Starks are wardens of the north, so long as the north will name me its king and keep the realm whole. Manderley's big hand went to his heart. White Harbour will name you, your grace. Flint names you, said Artos Flint. Wool names you, rumbled the mountain. Stannis did not smile. He drew the bandage from his thumb. Blood welled anew where Tycho Nestoris had his signature earlier that day. The king held his hand over the brazier until a single drop hissed and curled the flame. By steel and by blood, he said, I will unite the north and cast down the Lannisters and their hireling roses. I will break pretenders root and branch. I will see the Riverlands returned to their kin. A true king pays his debts. He looked toward the south, where no one could see for snow. It is time the Lannisters paid theirs. No cheer rose, only a rough murmur, oaths taken in throats too cold to waste on shouting. The white wolf lifted his head and watched the blood sputter in the coals. For an instant, I thought the flame burned a shade redder. By noon, the storm coughed up the truth of the morning beheading. It was Arnulf Karstark's head the snow had swallowed, not Theon's. The red roots at the islet were slick with traitor's blood. The ravens in their cages muttered Tree and Theon by turns, as if names could move men where swords could not. Night came hungry, wind worried the tents like a hound at old bone, and out on the lake the green seams still hissed where fire had kissed the ice. The ravens were penned by the king's pavilion, 2 cages lashed to a post, canvas weighted with snow. Orders are a kind of sail. Tear them, and the whole fleet drifts. Theon sat by the entry flap, wrapped in a patched cloak. By firelight he looked smaller, the boy from Pike who slept under nets that stank of yesterday's catch. The white wolf lay at his feet, a pale shadow with coals for eyes. "Rest," I told him. Snow rattled the canvas. A man coughed outside. Another answered too quick, brittle as frost. My hand found my axe. Theon turned before I did. "Ravens," he breathed, and rose. The flap peeled back, and 3 shadows spilled in with the cold. Faces wrapped, no colours shown. One went for the guard's throat, a gloved hand guiding a short knife true. Another had a hooked pole for the cages. The third shouldered a short bow already bent. "Alarm!" I shouted, lunging. The poleman jerked a cage. Wire screamed. The birds flung themselves at the bars in a panic of feather and iron. The bowman loosed for the king. Theon moved first. He struck the bowman's wrist, spoiled the shot, and took the arrow through his ribs instead. The sound that left him was the sound men make when the sea closes over their heads. He did not fall. His hands found the bowman's face, clawing for the eyes. The white wolf rose without a sound and became motion. Teeth took a throat. The poleman cursed and tried to run. I split his spine, and he folded like wet canvas. Guards burst in. Steel, shouts, snow. The last attacker bled and stilled under the wolf's weight. The ravens kept on shrieking Tree, Tree, and Theon, as if names could knit flesh. I was already kneeling. "Theon." He blinked up at me. Snow dusted his hair. "Told you," he whispered. "Hold," I said, and the word broke on my tongue. His fingers closed on my sleeve, weak as wet rope. "You're my sister," he swallowed. "Your brother is finally home." His hand fell away. Stannis pushed through the flap, face stark as wind. He took in the bodies, the cages, my brother bleeding out on the rushes. Without a word, he knelt, turned one of the dead by the wrist, and tugged the mitten free. A small flayed man had been stitched beneath the cuff, pink thread on dark wool. Another wore pink-dyed leather ties Bolton riders fancy on their hunting mitts. The third had a bone toggle carved in the Dreadfort's ugly fashion. The king stood, lifted the flap. "Captains," he called into the storm, "attend me." They came bristling, Manderley snow-whiskered, Flint and Wool shoulder to shoulder, the Moth Knight hard-eyed. They saw me, saw Theon, saw the ravens he'd saved. Stannis said, plain as iron, "He died in my service facing true north." That was all. It was enough. The cairn. At dawn we crossed to the islet. The lake had set where fire had not found it, grey glass dusted white. The heart tree wore its blood leaves heavy with snow. The faces in the bark watched, as trees in this country do. "Give him to the tree," I had told the king once. He had listened. We built a cairn of clean stones and set him under the red boughs. I spoke the names he could not, Bran, Rickon, Micken, Gage, the miller's boys whose names I would learn and keep. Crowfood muttered a rough prayer for boys with spears. Manderley bowed his great head and said nothing at all, which told me more than words. Stannis drew his sword, not to strike, but to touch the cairn. "The law is the law," he said, frost on steel, "yet the North records its truths." He glanced to his herald. "Cut it deep." On the largest stone they carved, plain as winter, "Theon, the Reclaimed." The white wolf sat beside me while the chisels worked, breath steaming in thin threads. When the last chip fell, the ravens in the far trees called a harsh "Theon, Theon," and the wind carried it down the frozen water like an oath. And back across the ice, as the day came up, thin and grey, the kind that steals heat from bone and hope from hearts, orders would fly by raven before the sun took hold. Dustin steadied, the snow shield code kept, the North counted by its own children. The captains spoke of bread and billets, of muster lists and men who would not see another dawn. The wind cut us just the same. The battle was won. Winter was not.